salvation train.
Salvation train. The salvation train delivers souls, redeemed by Christ the King. Destination paradise, where love is everything. So all aboard, my children, as we are leaving pretty soon. Make some room for Brother Terry. We are pulling out at noon. This train is bound for heaven. You can see you on the race. We believe in Jesus Christ has opened doors of grace. The ones that you have left behind, the morning your demise. I pray someday we'll meet again to claim the Savior's prize. This glory is the glory of eternity with God, for all the sing His praises in His presence all flow. Give your tickets to the angels now. We're riding with the Lord. You have won the final battle, because His word has been restored. As Master of the universe, Creator of mankind, He has kept His solemn promise. No believers left behind. You and Maggie shared 48 years together, along with the dedication of God. Going home to buddy and family of birds was a life you were so fond of. We welcome you and sign that you're watching over us. But very importantly, you are happy up above. Katie loves you and she misses you, and knows the reward will be worth the wait to join you in our heavenly Father one day, with you waiting at the gate.
Amen.
Well, someone like to share? Bring in the mic, or you can come up this way. I see that hand.
I didn't mean to be first if somebody else ready to say something. Maggie told me that she would like for me to say something today, but hold it down in 2 or 3 minutes. Do you know you don't tell a preacher to take a microphone in his hand and just talk for 2 or 3 minutes? I'll try to keep it brief. I'll tell you what, my name is Larry, and this is my wife Rita. And way back in the middle part of January, snow was on the ground. We moved from college in Illinois, and I took my first church, pastor at Bellevue. And in that church was a teenage girl. She was about 15 years old, and her name was Margaret. And it wasn't long that she couldn't even drive yet, she's only 15, but she found ways to come into our house. And I said, Rita, this girl really loves us. Isn't it amazing to come in and be a pastor? And I was a young pastor. I was only 25 at the time. And she was 15. And, of course, Rita was, I'm not going to tell her age, but anyway, she talked to Margaret, and Margaret talked to us, and I would be busy in and out of the house. But it wasn't long until we learned it wasn't us that she loved so much. We had a little 9-month-old baby girl, and Margaret took over. She loved that little girl, and she babysat for us. I think I paid you, didn't I? I did. You didn't even worry about that, did you? But she loved to be with little Lori and loved to be with us. About 3 years later, 2.5 years, whatever it was, we were called to move from this South Shore. Bellevue's not that far away, from Lake Erie, all the way down to the south of Ohio. In fact, the town was called South Point. And the reason it was called South Point is because that was the most low down you can get in Ohio. And there we were. Well, we would have contact every once in a while, but as we were moving, she said, "You're not taking Lori with you. I'm keeping her." And I gave her a good word of advice. I said, "Margaret," we didn't call you Maggie yet, "Margaret, let me give you some advice. You're going to have to find somebody else to love. Because we've got to take our little girl with us." Well, about a year later, she called me. And she said, Pastor, I took your advice. And I said, well, I gave you a lot of advice. What advice was that? I found somebody to love. And I want you to come up and marry me. I said, Margaret, I'm already married. No, I don't want to marry you. I want you to marry me to a guy named Terry. And that was in 1973. If you notice the wedding picture, the wedding party up front, the young guy with the gold shirt and the gold tie, that was me. I was still young. But I always, at weddings, I was the one behind the bride and groom. And so we had a wonderful celebration. And then over the years, we got to visiting Lake Erie. And we said, you know, we go everywhere on vacation. We lived up at Lake Erie. We love the lake. Why don't we start going to Lake Erie for vacation? And so somehow or another we got in touch. And every time we come up, nearly every time, we would visit at Trainorama. And we would, a little later on after our kids were grown up, we would stay with them. And I don't know, 3 or 4 or 5 times we stayed. And I'll tell you, that's when I started to get to know Terry. Terry was king of the castle. He had a domain there. And it was about 200 yards from the back of their house there down to East Harbor. And it had been a campground, but there were no campers there anymore. It was just a big yard with a lot of trees, you know. He had a flower garden there, and he had light displays on the fence. Every morning after breakfast, before we'd go do something else as tourists, he'd just sit on the porch for a while. So I'd go out while they did the dishes or whatever they did. And he'd say, flowers look a little dry down there. Would you mind going down and watering those? There's a bucket over there and a hose. Okay. And we would watch the Canadian geese that were all over the yard, and he had some favorites. Not among the geese, but he had a big herd of squirrels in the backyard. I guess my name's Larry, there's 2 or 3 other guys here named Larry. I asked Terry one day when these squirrels would come right up to him and he'd feed him peanuts and all that, you know. And I said, did you ever think about naming them? He said, oh yeah, that's Larry. Oh, okay. I didn't dare ask him if he named him in honor of me. He just said, that's Larry. Larry would finally, he'd get enough to eat, he'd run off, you know, over to the woods. And I'd look down on this side and I'd see another squirrel coming. He'd come right up, you know, and I said, oh, Terry, what's his name? Larry. Now wait a minute, Larry just went off on that side. This squirrel came up from this, well, I got a whole bunch of Larrys out there. And once in a while, he didn't let me feed him. And then, whichever Larry was there. And then we'd go inside, and in the evening, you know, he'd find little chores for me to do. You saw a lot of pictures here that he had a lot of recliners. He loved recliners. And one day I went, and he sat in one, I sat in the other one, and it didn't recline. And I said, well, why don't your chair recline? Why doesn't mine? Well, it needs fixed. And he got up and he got me some tools and handed me the tools. He went back over to his recliner. He sat there and he said, see if you can fix that. I turned the thing over, and I could have some mechanical abilities, and I got the thing fixed. But I just enjoyed the way he reigned over his domain. And it wasn't anything that I did not like, because we just had a great time of fellowship together. And so you could call this a lifelong friendship. And we're so glad the weather turned nicer. And today is so nice, and we can come all the way. We're not quite to the river now anymore, but we're still down there in Ohio. And we came to share this day and say our word of appreciation to this church, where they found a place to serve, a place to fellowship, and a place to enjoy the love of God together with God's people. Sorry, I I went more than 3 people.
Okay, anyone else?
Hello, my name is Carolyn Pope. This is a very short story about how Terry, also known as Boss or Boss Man, affects people that you don't even know you're affecting. We were going through a very hard time in our family, and Evan was helping out at Trainorama, and for several years. And it is Terry and Maggie were another set of grandparents for him while we were in our own blender of the life of Dad. And so I just want to thank Boss Man and Maggie very much. I love you both.
So we're getting the picture here that he is a master delegator.
It didn't happen.
Brother said it wasn't at your house, was
It
not
didn't
the
happen that way at our house. Anyway,
Terry's brother. Anyone else?
Yeah. The only thing I want to say is Uncle Terry was cool. Growing up, I think my sister and I can both agree that we don't know how him and our father were brothers. Their attitude was never the same. Just as a dumb story, John might remember one time going somewhere, and he looks at me and he says, "Hey Kenny, hey, what's up? How many people in that cemetery are dead?" I don't know, you remember that one or not? I don't know, Uncle Terry. 125. All of them. So that was the Polish side of me falling for that one, and I've been trying ever since to get someone else with it. It's never happened. So it is what it is. But I'm going to miss Uncle Terry. He was always the Santa at our Christmases. Worked with him a long time at the gas station. We had a lot of good times there. We liked our Vargo's foot-long chili dogs with cheese and mustard. Those were always good. Always got me, "Hey Terry, I'll buy you if you let me go get them." Okay, go ahead. That was a good way to get out of work for a little bit. So you know, we're going to miss him, and he was just a good dude. He was cool.
Now we're rolling.
I'll say something back. Blair here, he had his story wrong. We knew Maggie had Terry on the, road, whatever she did, before we left, before we moved away. But see, you were not part of mine and Maggie's little conversations in the bedroom, and away from you. But she had met this Terry, and I could tell she's liking him. And shucks, he was liking her. And I was jealous. I was kind of jealous. He's going to take my Maggie. She's my Maggie. She was always around. She'd go on outings with us. She'd help watch the kids, and the kids loved her. And she just was family, and so was her mama. Just family. And Terry was coming along and taking my girl, and good for Terry that we moved away, and I let him have her. I gave him my permission. Terry and I made friends, and we became the best of friends. Oh, did he love to tease me. But he'd show me he loved me. He couldn't say, "I love you." Did he tell you I love you? He would make a pot of beans, and he knew I loved beans, and Blair hated them. He'd freeze me a bowl to eat the next year when I came around. That was Terry. That's how Terry showed you he loved you. He could do for you. Maybe not the words, maybe it didn't come easy for him, but you know it was there. He was a wonderful friend, and he loved my girl. He loved my girl, and I did let him have her. He did have my permission. Yeah.
I guess I'll pick people out.
Well, that was good. I didn't have to threaten them all.
not family, friends. We came to know Terry and Maggie at Trinorama. Sorry, I get really emotional at these things, but it seems to me that Trinorama became a community for so many people, and that's all because of Terry and Maggie. When we started going there, we had a little boy. Hello. He's not little anymore. Yeah, he was really small. And he was quirky, let's put it that way, who loved trains. I mean, there for a while, I think we were at Trainorama every weekend for months and years on end. And they accepted him with his quirkiness, and we came to love him. Still do. Still do.
Thank you. That's wonderful.
I attend church with Terry and Brady here at Chapel on the Lake, and Terry was very quiet. Maybe hi here and there, but his presence was always known. We knew he would be back here, and Maggie would be up in the south booth. But I agree, at Trainorama, for a long time I've lived here and I've never been able to go into Trainorama, and I just use this turnaround. I'm needing to go the other direction. But had always wanted to go in there and experience it, and I think maybe we were one of the last people to actually experience Trainorama with them through the closing. He took us in, and wow, what an amazing place it was, and my boys got to see what was in there, and we got t-shirts, and we got to feel the full experience of Trainorama, and he was very kind, and like I said, his presence was always known.
Now, Maggie, in regards to Trainorama, did that started in his dad's house or basement? Where did it start?
Started in his dad's, in their basement, and then they moved it to another building up in Marblehead.
Right by the school.
And it opened in '72 when I graduated from high school, so that's where I went immediately.
And you were a part of it all the way through, once it.
Once it got moved into a new building, yes.
Chief engineer.
And a good engineer at that.
Hi, and I just want to tell you that I've known him a long, long time, and he was kind of the boss too here. He sat right there, and I tried to, he's the first one here, and I tried to, never could catch up with him, but I would come in, and he would say, "You're running a little late today, aren't you, lady?" And I say, "Well, I had a train. I had a train is by me." And he said, "Oh, excuses, excuses." So we would kid back and forth for a long time. Well, about 2 years ago, I thought I'd sit on that seat there and visit with him. While I was sitting there visiting with him, I said, "Well, I gotta go in front where I sit." So I went to stand up, my skirt fell off. And he's laughing and laughing. I said, "Quick, I'm giving me some pills, give me some." "Oh no," he says, "you're on your own." So I tried to get up and get around, and he didn't help me. I said, I was on my own. So next time, Nick, and wear a skirt, I'm gonna make sure the elastic is good.
Just to let you know, Big Brother, he tried to be a boss. He could never boss me, and he could never boss his sister-in-law. Several times, I'd go over to the house, and he'd say, "Got your tools with you?" I'd say, "No, why?" He says, "The step needs fixed." Maggie vouch for this. "The picnic table out back is broke. I need you to put a rail back into the fence." And I'd say, "Well, I have to go home and get my stuff." So I'd go all the way back to Bellevue, come all the way back, and it'd be pouring down rain. And he'd say, "You're not gonna fix it?" I says, "You gonna hold the umbrella?" And I'll be darned if he didn't stand out there and hold an umbrella while I fix the picnic table. But the worst of the whole thing was, the best time of all, him and Maggie come over to the house, this 2 years ago, and putting a great big huge deck wrapping around my garage, an L-shaped deck. And he sits down, he says, I had a lot of it done, I had the decking on half of it, and I was working on the front part of it, and he says, I think you could move that stringer over a little bit. He says, you're about a 16th or an 1/8 of an inch off. And I just threw him a hammer, and I says, there you go, big guy, you do it if you want it moved. And after that, he never said a word. But, like everybody says, he tried to be the boss.
Cute.
Anybody else?
Well, we have a time of refreshments after, you're all welcome to. And maybe then you can approach Maggie or just share some of those if you have something you'd like her to know. I think it'll mean a lot to her. All right, last call. Okay. Terry has 2 favorite songs, correct? And Maggie's put those together for us to close our time.
will fulfill your heart's desire. Take you to the place you want to go. Keep dreaming of the land of your history, and you're walking the streets before you know. On wings of eagles they took to the sky. Not sure on his magic carpet would die. And cries of joy at the first shalom. 50,000 Yemenites coming home. My heart is dancing in Jerusalem. 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 Next came Ezra and Nehemiah, redeeming our brothers of Babylon.